should have asked more questions before I took that job. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Not what happened in the cabin, but how easily I walked into it. My name's Dale Whitmore. I'm a 47-year-old electrician from Knoxville, Tennessee. In the fall of 2021, I'd just come off a bad stretch. Divorce finalized in August, work had dried up, and my buddy Marcus told me about a property management gig up in the Smoky Mountain foothills, off-season caretaking. A private cabin on 40 acres, no neighbors for 3 miles in any direction. The owner lived in Atlanta and just needed someone to check the pipes, watch for damage, run the generator if the power went out. Cash. $800 a month plus free housing through November. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The drive up was beautiful. Mid-October, leaves doing that thing they do in East Tennessee where the whole mountain looks like it's on fire. I had my truck loaded with tools, 2 weeks of food, my dog Remy, a 7-year-old shepherd mix who'd been through the divorce with me and was basically the only consistent thing left in my life. I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed. Quiet, space, time to think. I should have paid attention to how Remy acted when we pulled up the gravel drive. She wouldn't get out of the truck. I laughed it off. New place, new smells. She'd been anxious ever since we left the apartment. I grabbed my bags, told her it was fine, and eventually she jumped down and followed me. But she stayed pressed against my leg the whole time I unlocked the front door. Didn't run ahead like she usually did. Didn't sniff the perimeter. Just stayed right there, stiff, watching the tree line. The cabin itself was nice, bigger than I expected. 2 stories, log construction, a wraparound porch, a wood stove in the living room. The owner, a man named Gerald Holt, had left a binder on the kitchen counter. Generator instructions, emergency contacts, a list of what days the propane company came, normal stuff. At the very back of the binder, almost like an afterthought, there was a single handwritten note on yellow legal paper. It said, "Don't leave the porch lights off after dark. All of them. Both sides." No explanation, no signature. Just that. I figured it was a wildlife thing, bears maybe. I'd dealt with bears on job sites before. I turned the porch lights on, made dinner, got the wood stove going, and spent my first night in the cabin listening to the wind come off the mountain. Remy slept at the foot of the bed. I slept fine. The first week was uneventful, beautiful even. I fixed a slow leak under the kitchen sink, cleared gutters, tested the generator. I drove down to the nearest town, Cosby, about 9 miles out, every couple of days for supplies. I started to feel like myself again, like the divorce and the debt and everything else was getting smaller in the rear view. Then, on the 8th night, I forgot the porch lights. I didn't realize it until I was already in bed, half asleep. I remember thinking, should I get up? And then I thought about how stupid it was to worry about it. Bears don't care about porch lights. That's not how bears work. I turned over and closed my eyes. Remy started growling at 2 a.m. Not the soft, half-hearted growl she did at raccoons or wind sounds. This was different. Low, sustained. The kind of growl that starts in the chest and doesn't stop. She was standing at the bedroom window and the hair on her back was raised from her neck all the way down to her tail. I got up and looked out. At first I didn't see anything, just the dark shape of the tree line and the clearing in front of the cabin. The porch light was off. I'd never turned it on. My eyes adjusted slowly and I stood there in the dark bedroom scanning the clearing. There was a truck parked at the end of the gravel drive, just sitting there with the headlights off. No engine sound, no movement. I couldn't make out the model or color in the dark, just the shape. It wasn't there at midnight when I'd let Remy out. It was just there now at 2 a.m., headlights off, engine off, at the end of a private drive on a property with no address listed anywhere publicly. I told myself it was a lost driver, somebody who'd pulled off, maybe sleeping it off. I watched for 20 minutes. The truck didn't move. I finally got up, turned on the porch lights, both sides, like the note said, and when I looked back out the window, the truck was gone. I hadn't heard it start, hadn't heard tires on gravel. It was just gone. I checked the door locks and didn't sleep the rest of the night. I called Gerald Holt in the morning. He picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. I half expected to leave a voicemail. I told him what I'd seen. There was a pause before he answered that lasted just a beat too long. He said, "Did you leave the porch lights off?" I told him I had, by accident. He said, "Don't do that again." I asked him what that meant, who the truck belonged to, why it mattered. He said there'd been an issue with a former caretaker a few years back, somebody who didn't work out, that the porch lights being on was just a signal that someone was home and awake, and it usually discouraged unwanted curiosity. I asked him what that meant, unwanted curiosity. He said, "Just keep the lights on, Dale. You'll be fine." And he hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that, looking at that yellow note in the binder. Don't leave the porch lights off after dark. All of them, both sides. Not bears or wildlife or security. Just that instruction, with nothing behind it. I should have left that day. I know that now. I stayed because I needed the money and because it was daylight and because I convinced myself I was overthinking it. I stayed because rational daylight thinking is the biggest lie the brain tells you. The next 3 nights were quiet. Lights on every night. Remy relaxed a little. I started to feel okay again. I told myself the truck was nothing, maybe just teens or a hunter checking a trail or exactly what I'd said originally, a lost driver who'd pulled off. On the 4th night, I was on the porch around 9 o'clock, having coffee and listening to the trees, when I heard something I still can't fully explain. Someone knocked on the back door. Not frantically, not urgently. 3 slow, spaced-out knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The way a person knocks when they've been there before and they're comfortable. Patient. The back door was on the opposite side of the cabin from the porch, facing the woods. There was no road back there, no trail I knew of. Just 40 acres of mountain hardwood forest going straight up a ridge. Remy didn't bark. She went completely silent, which was somehow worse. I went inside slowly and stood in the hallway listening. Nothing for a full minute. Then those 3 knocks again, same pace, same weight. I grabbed my flashlight and my phone and walked to the back door, and I stood there with my hand on the deadbolt. I could hear my own breathing. I asked, loudly, clearly, "Who's there?" Nothing. I stood at that door for a long time, long enough that my hand started to cramp on the flashlight. Then I heard footsteps on the back porch, slow and deliberate, moving from left to right across the porch boards, then off the far end and into the leaf litter, the sound fading up into the dark woods. I did not open that door. I called Marcus the next morning and told him the whole thing. He got quiet in a way that I didn't like. Then he told me something I hadn't known when I took the job. The caretaker before me, a man named Terry, apparently, had left in a hurry 2 falls before. Hadn't explained why. Just called Gerald Holt and told him he was done and drove off in the night. Marcus had heard this secondhand and hadn't thought it was important enough to mention. I asked Marcus if he knew what happened to Terry. He said he didn't know, just that Terry had stopped returning calls. I packed my truck that afternoon. I didn't call Gerald Holt, didn't collect the rest of the money owed to me, didn't leave a note. I just loaded Remy in the cab and drove back down that gravel drive in the daylight. And I didn't look back. I've thought about those knocks every night since. 3 of them, slow and comfortable, like they'd done it many times before, like they knew the pattern, like they were used to someone answering. What bothers me most, what I still can't work out, is that when I walked down the hallway toward the back door, I passed the window that faced the back porch, and the porch light was on. Both of them were on. I'd checked before dark. I always checked. Someone had turned the back porch light off from the outside. The thing about working search and rescue is that you stop being afraid of the dark. You've been in it too many times, in too many bad situations to let it mean anything. That's what I told myself anyway, until the weekend I spent at the Ridgeline Camp in northern Montana, and I realized there are some things that the dark isn't responsible for. My name is Paul Enberg. I'm 52 years old, retired Forest Service, former SAR volunteer out of Flathead County. This happened in early March of 2019. The kind of March that Montana does, where it looks like winter finally broke and then comes back and buries you. I was up at a Forest Service cabin near the Whitefish Range, a utility cabin, nothing fancy, used by rangers and SAR teams doing wilderness assessments. I'd been assigned a solo 3-day survey, check the snowpack readings, inspect a stretch of trail that had reported erosion damage the previous fall, and calibrate 2 remote weather sensors that had been sending malformed data back to the station in Kalispell. I'd done this kind of solo assignment a dozen times. I had my radio, my GPS, my pack, my emergency gear. The cabin had a wood stove, a propane burner, a cot, and a storage box with emergency rations. Standard issue. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon, confirmed radio contact with the Kalispell station, and got settled. The first sensor was fine. Took me 4 hours to hike out and back Friday morning. Recalibration took 20 minutes. The second one was further up the drainage, a harder day's hike, so I planned that for Saturday and spent Friday afternoon doing the trail assessment. Friday evening I was making dinner on the propane burner when my radio crackled. Not a voice, just static in a pattern. Short burst, pause. Short burst, pause. Repeating. I assumed it was interference from the weather. There'd been a front moving in all day. I turned the squelch up and it disappeared. I ate, read for a while, and went to sleep around 10. At 1:15 in the morning, the radio woke me up. Same pattern. Short burst, pause. Short burst, pause. But louder now. Cleaner. Not like interference, more like someone was keying a mic rhythmically, deliberately. I sat up and listened. The pattern ran for about 40 seconds, then stopped for 2 minutes, then started again. I'd been in SAR long enough to know that rhythmic keying could be a distress signal, the standard 3-burst SOS, but this wasn't SOS. This was 2 bursts, repeating on a frequency I wasn't supposed to have traffic on, a maintenance channel mostly used internally. I keyed my radio and identified myself. Flathead SAR, Enberg at Ridgeline. I've got traffic on this channel. Please identify. Standard protocol. No response. The pattern continued for another 20 seconds and then cut off completely. I radioed the Kalispell station. Night dispatch picked up. A woman named June I'd worked with for years. I told her what I'd heard. She checked the logs, said there was no other active personnel in my sector, no scheduled traffic on that frequency. She said it was probably equipment, one of the sensors malfunctioning maybe. She told me to log it and get some sleep. I logged it. I didn't sleep. I want to be precise about what bothered me because it wasn't the transmission itself. It was that the transmission stopped as soon as I keyed my own radio and responded. Like whatever was sending it heard me. Interference doesn't do that. A malfunctioning sensor doesn't do that. You key a radio to respond to static and the static doesn't care. It just keeps going. This stopped. Saturday morning was clear and cold. I headed out for the second sensor at first light, moving through about 18 inches of hardpack. Beautiful country. The kind of silence you only get in high Montana in early winter. No wind, no birds, just snow and timber. I found the sensor, did the recalibration, had lunch on a rock outcropping with a view of the drainage below. That's when I saw the snowshoe tracks. Coming up the drainage, paralleling my route but staying in the trees, maybe 200 meters to my east. Recent. They crossed over wind-drifted snow that was still partially intact, which meant they'd been made in the last few hours. Someone had been moving up this drainage on the same approximate heading as me, staying in the tree cover. I'm going to tell you exactly what went through my mind because I want to be honest about it. My first thought was, backcountry traveler, legal to be there, nothing unusual. My second thought was, they stayed in the trees the whole time. My third thought was, there's no trailhead in that direction. The nearest access point for this drainage from that angle was 12 miles out. I followed the tracks down for about a quarter mile before I lost them where the terrain dropped into a rocky runnel that had wind-scoured the snow clear. I hiked back to the cabin faster than I needed to. I did a perimeter check when I got back, something I'd never done before at a Forest Service cabin, but that's where my head was at. Everything looked untouched. No tracks in the snow around the cabin. I went inside, stoked the wood stove, and radioed June to update my status. I mentioned the tracks. She said it was probably a solo ski tourer. Told me the area had been getting more backcountry traffic since the pandemic, people going further out to avoid crowds. She was right, probably. Logically, she was right. But that night, a little after midnight, I heard footsteps in the snow outside the cabin. Not close footsteps, not right outside the door. Somewhere in the tree line to the north, maybe 40 or 50 meters out. The kind of sound that reaches you just at the edge of perception, where you're not completely sure you heard it. I lay on the cot and listened. Snow settling, maybe. An animal. Then I heard breathing, or what I thought was breathing. A slow, rhythmic sound, just slightly too regular to be wind, coming from the same direction. My hand found my radio on autopilot, and before I'd made a conscious decision, I'd keyed it. The sound stopped, immediately, the same way the radio signal had stopped the night before. I lay there for 2 hours with my flashlight in my hand and didn't hear it again. I broke camp at dawn, 4 hours before my assigned checkout time. I radioed June and told her I was heading out early, gave her the reason as weather concern, which was partially true. The front had moved faster than projected. I've thought about this for 6 years. I've run every rational explanation I can find. Backcountry traveler who made camp in the trees for some reason. An animal. Acoustic distortion from the drainage. Sound traveling weirdly in cold air, which it does. But here's what I can't explain away. When I drove out and hit the highway, I stopped at a pullout to check my gear. I happened to look at my radio. Really look at it. Someone had changed the channel. Not the frequency I'd been using, not June's dispatch channel. It had been moved to a channel I'd never used on this trip. The one that all that rhythmic static had been on. I hadn't touched that dial. I was certain of it. And if I hadn't touched it, if whoever was walking in the trees outside that cabin at midnight had come close enough to the cabin to change a radio dial, then the real question isn't what they were trying to signal. It's why they needed me on that channel. I still haven't found an answer that I'm comfortable with. Have you ever been somewhere so remote that you realized no one would hear you if something went wrong? Tell me in the comments, because that's a feeling I can't get out of my system even now. I want to say up front that I'm not a person who panics. I'm a 44-year-old logistics manager from Columbus, Ohio. I coach my son's youth baseball team. I drive a Subaru. I am, by every measure, a calm and unremarkable person. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that what I'm about to describe didn't come from anxiety or sleep deprivation or an overactive imagination. It came from paying attention. This was July of 2022. My wife Rachel and I had rented a lake cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for a family week. Me, Rachel, our 2 kids, Caleb, who was 9, and Lily, who was 6. We'd done cabin trips before, always through rental platforms. Always fine. This one was a little more remote than usual, about 40 minutes north of Munising, on a private road off the main highway. No cell service past the last 1.5 miles of gravel. The rental listing had good reviews. Photos looked great. A family from the Chicago suburbs had left a 5-star review 2 weeks before we booked. We drove up on a Sunday, got there around 6 in the evening, kids exhausted from the road, Rachel navigating off the downloaded maps because our phones were useless. The cabin was exactly what it looked like in the photos. 2-story, big deck, lake access down a short trail through the birch trees. A kayak rack with 2 kayaks, a fire pit, picnic table. Beautiful. The key was in a lockbox by the front door, code from the host, everything normal. We unloaded, the kids ran straight for the lake, I fired up the grill. It was one of those first evenings where everything is right and the whole point of a vacation actually makes sense. I found the first thing around 8 o'clock while I was checking the cabin for basics. In the second upstairs bedroom, the one we'd put the kids in, there was a travel bag under the bed. Not our travel bag. A navy blue duffel, medium-sized, with a shoulder strap. I pulled it out and opened it. Men's clothes, medium size, rolled neatly. 3 changes by the look of it. A toiletry bag, a phone charger, a paperback novel, the kind you buy in an airport. No wallet, no ID, no phone. I brought it downstairs and showed Rachel. She messaged the host immediately through the rental platform. We found a bag that appears to belong to a previous guest. Can you advise? The host responded within a few minutes, said the previous guests had messaged him about a missing bag. They'd likely left it and would be driving up to retrieve it sometime in the week. He apologized and said he should have mentioned it. He'd let them know we had it. We put the bag by the front door. Logical. Easy. A guest left a bag, they'd be back for it. Done. I put it out of my mind. The next day was perfect. Kayaking, a short hike to a waterfall, hamburgers on the grill, a fire at night. Caleb caught a small bass from the dock. Lily collected 23 pine cones and named each one. Rachel and I sat on the deck after the kids went to bed and watched the lake go dark. The bag was still by the door when we went to sleep. When I came downstairs at 6:30 the next morning, the bag was gone. The front door was locked. The back door was locked. All the windows I checked were latched. There was no note, no message from the host on Rachel's phone, no indication that anyone had been there. The bag was simply not by the door anymore. I want to be honest with you about my thought process in that moment. I told Rachel immediately, and we agreed that someone must have come while we were sleeping, that they had a key or had unlocked the lockbox, and that it was technically fine. Their bag, and the host had told us they'd be coming. It was the normalizing that smart people do when something unsettling happens. There's a reasonable explanation, and I am a calm, unremarkable person. But then Rachel said, "Did they go upstairs?" I hadn't thought about that. The bag had been upstairs when we found it, under the bed in the room where the kids had slept. Neither of us said anything for a while. I checked the kids' room. They were both still asleep. Nothing looked disturbed. The room was exactly as we'd left it. Lily's pine cone collection arranged on the windowsill. Caleb's baseball mitt on the chair. Fine. Everything fine. I messaged the host and asked him to confirm what time his guests had retrieved the bag. He said he hadn't heard from them yet. He said he didn't know it had been picked up. I read that message 3 times. Rachel wanted to leave. I talked her out of it, which is the thing I have the hardest time living with. I said we'd overreacted, that obviously someone with a key had come and gotten their bag, that the host just didn't know yet. I said I'd check the lockbox code and call the management company and get everything sorted. I called the management company, an actual person, not just the platform. The woman I spoke to pulled up our reservation and confirmed what the host had said. The previous guests had reported a missing bag, and yes, they'd been given access to retrieve it. I asked her when they'd come. She said their access had been scheduled for the following Friday. We were on Tuesday. I sat in the car in the driveway with the phone in my hand and ran through everything. Previous guests had a bag. Host said they'd come at some point. Management company said their scheduled access was Friday. Bag was gone Tuesday morning. Someone had been in the cabin, at night, with a key not authorized through the management company. When I walked back inside, I noticed something I'd missed in the morning: the second car seat. We drove up with 2 car seats in the back of the Subaru. Lily still used a booster, and we'd left it in. But in the gravel driveway where I'd been parking the car, there were tire tracks from another vehicle. A second car, from the tread width, probably an SUV. And about 10 feet from where my car was parked, just off the edge of the gravel, there was a child's car seat, the small kind, for a toddler, just sitting there in the grass at the edge of the driveway. Nobody around, no car, no person, no context. It hadn't been there the night before. I was certain of it. I'd walked right past that spot at 11 p.m. to check on the fire. Rachel saw my face when I came back inside. We left within the hour. Packed the kids like we were just doing an outing, keeping it casual, keeping it calm. Caleb was frustrated about the fish he hadn't caught yet. Lily cried about leaving her pine cones. I drove. I called the management company from a gas station 14 miles down the highway and told them we'd left. Told them what I'd found. The woman I spoke to was sympathetic. She said she'd look into it. She took a report. I've called back twice since then. The first time, she said the previous guests claimed they hadn't been to the property that week. The second time, no one answered. The car seat is the thing I can't build an explanation around. Who leaves a car seat in a field? Why would you come in the night to retrieve a bag and leave a car seat? Who else had a key to that cabin? And more than any of that, the question that follows me is why the car seat was positioned the way it was. Not thrown down, not fallen over, upright, facing the cabin, right where you'd place something if you wanted a clear view of the front door. I have 2 kids. I think about that angle constantly. I still don't know who was at that cabin. I don't know why they came at night. I don't know whose child that seat belonged to. I do know we never went back. If you made it through all 3 of these, you already know you're not sleeping tonight. Subscribe if you want more true stories that the people who lived them wish they could forget.